In 1962, the Pentagon presented a plan to President Kennedy, a plan so shocking that it remained classified for 40 years, a plan to attack American citizens, to sink U.S. ships, to hijack planes, all to justify a war. The code name, Operation Northwoods. And when the files were finally declassified in 1997, nobody could believe what they read. March 13, 1962. The Joint Chiefs of Staff walked into a secure room at the Pentagon. In their hands, a document stamped Top Secret Special Handling NOFORN. Inside those pages was a blueprint for terror. But this wasn't intelligence about enemy plans. This was America's own plan to attack itself. The document began with a simple premise. We could develop a communist Cuban terror campaign in the Miami area, in other Florida cities, and even in Washington. Read that again. Not prevent a terror campaign, not respond to one, develop one. The architects of this plan were not fringe extremists. These were the highest-ranking military officials in the United States, chairman of the Joint Chiefs Lyman Lemnitzer, the men who commanded America's nuclear arsenal, the men who could launch World War III with a phone call, and they were proposing something unthinkable. To understand Operation Northwoods, you need to understand 1962. The Cold War was at its peak. Just 90 miles from Florida, Fidel Castro had established a communist regime. The Bay of Pigs invasion had failed spectacularly 1 year earlier. CIA-trained Cuban exiles were captured or killed on the beaches. The Kennedy administration was humiliated on the world stage. The Pentagon wanted revenge. The CIA wanted redemption. They wanted war. But there was a problem. The American public had no appetite for another conflict. World War II was still fresh in memory. Korea had been costly and inconclusive. Vietnam was just beginning to heat up. Without a clear provocation, without a Pearl Harbor moment, Congress would never approve military action against Cuba. The American people wouldn't support it. So the Joint Chiefs asked themselves a question. What if we created that provocation ourselves? What if we gave the American people their Pearl Harbor moment? What if we manufactured the justification for war? The answer became Operation Northwoods, and it was far more detailed, far more elaborate, and far more disturbing than anyone could imagine. What you're about to hear isn't conspiracy theory. Every word is documented in official U.S. government files, declassified, authenticated, verified by multiple sources. Real. This actually happened. Well, almost happened. The Northwoods document contained 8 major proposals, each more disturbing than the last, each carefully planned, each designed to manufacture public outrage and justify invasion. Proposal 1. The hijacking campaign. We could develop a communist Cuban terror campaign in the Miami area, in other Florida cities, and even in Washington. The terror campaign could be pointed at Cuban refugees seeking haven in the United States. Let that sink in. They suggested bombing Cuban refugee centers, sinking boats filled with Cuban refugees trying to reach Florida, setting off explosives in Miami neighborhoods, and blaming it all on Castro's agents. These weren't theoretical enemies in some distant land. These were real people, fleeing communism, seeking safety in America. People who trusted the United States to protect them, and the Pentagon was proposing to murder them as propaganda. Proposal 2. The fake funerals. We could foster attempts on lives of Cuban refugees in the United States, even to the extent of wounding in instances to be widely publicized. Stage assassination attempts. Shoot real people but not fatally. Create martyrs who could tell their stories to the press. Hold elaborate funerals with full media coverage, grieving families on television, all theater, all designed to manufacture outrage, all fake, but with real bullets and real blood. The document even suggested which cities would be best for maximum media impact. Miami, obviously, but also Washington, D.C., New York, anywhere with major news outlets and large populations. But wait, because it gets so much worse. You think you've heard the most shocking part. You haven't, not even close. What comes next crosses a line that should never be crossed. Proposal 3. Sink an American ship. We could blow up a U.S. ship in Guantanamo Bay and blame Cuba. Casualty lists in U.S. newspapers would cause a helpful wave of national indignation. Read that phrase again, helpful wave of national indignation. They were planning to kill American servicemen and describe the public's grief as helpful. That's how they saw it. Dead sailors weren't a tragedy. They were a tool, a means to an end. They detailed exactly how to do it. Plant explosives on a Navy vessel. Detonate during a shift change for maximum casualties. Stage evidence of Cuban involvement. Prepare the casualty lists in advance. Brief the commanders at Guantanamo Bay. Have ambulances ready. Have the media story prepared before the explosion even happened. The USS Maine had been the excuse for the Spanish-American War in 1898. They wanted to create a new Maine. Except this time, it wouldn't be an accident or uncertain cause. This time it would be murder, premeditated, documented, approved at the highest levels. And if killing American sailors wasn't enough to shock you. Proposal 4. The drone aircraft. This one is chilling in its precision, in its cold calculation. An aircraft at Eglin Air Force Base would be painted and numbered as an exact duplicate for a civil registered aircraft belonging to a CIA proprietary organization in the Miami area. At a designated time, the duplicate would be substituted for the actual civil aircraft and would be loaded with selected passengers, all boarded under carefully prepared aliases. The actual registered aircraft would be converted to a drone. Let me translate that from military speak into English. They would take a real passenger plane, paint a military drone to look exactly like it, put fake passengers with fake identities on the fake plane. Those fake passengers would be CIA operatives or military personnel. The fake plane would take off from Miami and fly toward Cuba. Meanwhile, the real passenger plane would be converted into a remote-controlled drone. It would take off on the same flight path. Once over the Caribbean, the fake plane with the fake passengers would divert to Eglin Air Force Base and land safely. The drone would continue toward Cuba. The drone aircraft and the actual aircraft will be scheduled to allow a rendezvous south of Florida. From the rendezvous point, the passenger-carrying aircraft will descend to minimum altitude and go directly into an auxiliary field at Eglin Air Force Base, where arrangements will have been made to evacuate the passengers and return the aircraft to its original status. Then comes the key part. The drone aircraft, meanwhile, will continue to fly the filed flight plan. When over Cuba, the drone will be transmitting on the international distress frequency, a Mayday message stating he is under attack by Cuban MiG aircraft. The transmission will be interrupted by destruction of the aircraft, which will be triggered by radio signal. A fake plane crash, with fake victims, with fake last words broadcast on emergency frequencies, with real wreckage falling into the ocean, all to start a real war. They had thought through every detail, the timing of the flights, the radio frequencies, the cover story for the operatives posing as passengers, the recovery of the fake plane, the destruction of the drone, the media narrative, the United Nations presentation, everything. This wasn't a rough idea. This was an operational plan ready for execution. And they weren't done, not even close, because what came next was the most elaborate part of the entire operation. The Northwoods planners weren't amateurs. They understood that a single incident might not be enough. They understood psychology. They understood media. They understood how to manipulate public opinion. So they designed not just attacks, but an entire campaign of terror spread over weeks or months. Step 1. Establish the pattern. Start rumors many. Use clandestine radio. Land friendly Cubans in uniform over the fence to stage attack on the base. Capture Cuban saboteurs inside the base. Start riots near the base main gate, friendly Cubans. Blow up ammunition inside the base, start fires. Burn aircraft on airbase, sabotage. Lob mortar shells from outside of base into base. Capture assault teams approaching from the sea or vicinity of Guantanamo City. Capture militia group which storms the base. Sabotage ship in harbor, large fires, naphthalene. Sink ship near harbor entrance. Conduct funerals for mock victims. Create chaos. Make it look like Castro was escalating. Build a narrative over time. Condition the American people to expect violence from Cuba. Each incident would be small enough to be plausible, but together they would paint a picture of increasing aggression. The beauty of this approach from their perspective was that it was a slow burn. No single incident would trigger immediate war, but the accumulation would make war seem inevitable, necessary, justified. Step 2. The media campaign. They would plant stories in newspapers. The Pentagon had contacts at every major publication. Stage photographs of the attacks. Create evidence for journalists to discover. Remember, this was 1962. There was no internet, no independent fact-checking, no citizen journalism. If Walter Cronkite read it on the CBS Evening News, America believed it. The plan specifically mentioned using clandestine radio to spread rumors in Cuba and among Cuban exile communities. These rumors would then be confirmed by the staged attacks. It was a closed loop of manufactured reality. Step 3. The United Nations presentation. The suggested courses of action appended to Enclosure A are based on the premise that U.S. military intervention will result from a period of heightened U.S.-Cuban tensions, which place the United States in the position of suffering justifiable grievances. World opinion and the United Nations Forum should be favorably affected by developing the international image of the Cuban government as rash and irresponsible, and as an alarming and unpredictable threat to the peace of the Western Hemisphere. Translation: will create fake grievances, will document them meticulously, will take them to the United Nations, will present our manufactured evidence, will get international support, and then will invade with the world's blessing. They had even prepared draft language for the UN Security Council resolution. They had prepared maps showing the Cuban aggression. They had prepared casualty lists, damage assessments, forensic reports, all fake, all ready to go. This wasn't a hastily written memo by some paranoid general. This was a professionally crafted 15-page operation plan, with appendices, with timelines, with coordination between the Joint Chiefs, the CIA, and the State Department. This had institutional support across multiple agencies. Multiple people read this document. Multiple people contributed to it. Multiple people thought it was a good idea. That's perhaps the most disturbing part. So the question becomes, if they planned it this carefully, if it had this much support, why didn't it happen? The answer is one man, one decision, one moment when someone said no. March 13, 1962. Chairman Lyman Lemnitzer presented Operation Northwoods to Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara. McNamara, a former Ford Motor Company executive known for his analytical approach, read through the document. He was skeptical, deeply troubled, but he passed it up the chain of command. It reached President John F. Kennedy's desk. Kennedy read it, and according to those close to him, he was reportedly furious, disgusted, appalled. No official record exists of exactly what Kennedy said when he rejected the plan. Those conversations weren't documented. National security meetings of that nature weren't recorded or transcribed in detail. But we know the outcome. Operation Northwoods was dead on arrival. Kennedy not only rejected it, he rejected it emphatically. But Kennedy didn't just say no. He took action against those who proposed it. Lyman Lemnitzer, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the highest-ranking military officer in the United States, was not reappointed when his term ended later that year. This was unprecedented. Chairmen of the Joint Chiefs were typically given second terms, but Kennedy refused. Instead, Lemnitzer was essentially exiled. He was reassigned as Supreme Allied Commander in Europe, a prestigious title but far from Washington's power center, away from the Pentagon, away from the White House, away from where decisions were made. The message was clear. This kind of thinking was unacceptable in the Kennedy administration. Proposing false flag attacks against American citizens was a career-ending move. But here's the disturbing question that has haunted historians ever since. If Kennedy hadn't been president, would someone else have approved it? If this had landed on the desk of a more hawkish president, someone more desperate for a win against communism, someone less troubled by moral ambiguity, would Operation Northwoods have moved from proposal to execution? We'll never know, but the fact that it was seriously proposed tells us it was within the realm of possibility. The story could have ended there, a rejected plan buried in classified files forgotten by history. Kennedy had said no. The generals had been rebuked. Justice prevailed. But then something happened that changed everything. For 35 years, Operation Northwoods remained buried, classified. Unknown to the public, unknown to historians, unknown to everyone except the handful of people who wrote it, the handful who rejected it, and whoever maintained the classified filing systems at the Pentagon and National Archives. The documents sat in boxes, in vaults, stamped top secret special handling NOFORN, no foreign nationals. Even most government officials with security clearances had no idea it existed. Then in 1997, something changed. The John F. Kennedy Assassination Records Review Board was doing its work. This board had been created by Congress in 1992 after Oliver Stone's controversial film, JFK, sparked massive public demand for transparency about Kennedy's assassination. The board's mission was to systematically review and declassify documents related to Kennedy's presidency and death. A researcher named James Bamford was digging through newly released files. Bamford was a journalist and author specializing in intelligence agencies, particularly the National Security Agency. He was looking for documents related to Cuba, the Bay of Pigs, Kennedy's foreign policy. He stumbled upon a reference, a footnote in another document, a catalog number, a filing reference. He requested the file number 200-21000210-104. He waited. These requests could take months, but eventually it arrived, and what he saw stunned him. What arrived was Operation Northwoods, all 15 pages, every proposal, every detail, every disturbing suggestion, and it was real. Official U.S. government stationery, official signatures, official stamps. This wasn't a conspiracy theory. This wasn't a forgery. This was genuine. Bamford published his findings in his 2001 book, Body of Secrets, Anatomy of the Ultra-Secret National Security Agency. The mainstream media finally picked up the story. ABC News ran it as a major investigative piece. The Baltimore Sun published excerpts. The Guardian in the UK covered it. Major news outlets around the world reported on this decades-old plot. But here's what's shocking. Even in 2001, many people didn't believe it. They assumed it was conspiracy theory. They thought Bamford had been duped by fake documents. They assumed government critics were making up stories to discredit the military. The idea that the U.S. military would propose killing Americans was too extreme, too Hollywood, too absurd to be real. Until the National Security Archive at George Washington University authenticated every page. Until the National Archives confirmed the document's provenance. Until multiple independent historians verified the signatures, the paper, the typeface, the filing systems. These documents were real, official, genuine U.S. government proposals. And suddenly, a lot of other historical events started to look different. Because once you know that Operation Northwoods was real, once you know that false flag attacks were seriously proposed and nearly approved, you start to ask different questions about history. Operation Northwoods forces us to confront profoundly uncomfortable truths about government, power, and the willingness of institutions to sacrifice individuals for strategic goals. Truth 1. It was seriously considered at the highest levels. This wasn't one rogue officer with a crazy idea. This wasn't some low-level analyst going off the reservation. This went through official channels. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs proposed it. Multiple departments reviewed it. Military lawyers vetted the language to ensure it was legally defensible. Graphics specialists created the diagrams and operational maps. Logistics experts calculated the timing and resources required. This had institutional support at the highest levels of the U.S. military and intelligence apparatus. That means there was a culture, a mindset, an organizational framework that made this seem not only possible but reasonable. Truth 2. The mindset existed and may still exist. If the Joint Chiefs could propose this in 1962, what mindset allowed that? What culture within the Pentagon made this seem acceptable, even necessary? What training, what worldview, what philosophy made attack your own citizens a viable option on the menu of strategies? And most disturbing, did that mindset disappear or did it just go underground? Did the rejection of Northwoods change the culture or did it just change the documentation? Did they stop planning such operations or did they just stop writing them down? Truth 3. One man stopped it. Kennedy's rejection was not inevitable. It wasn't guaranteed. Another president might have been convinced, might have been told this is the only way to stop communism, might have been shown intelligence reports, fake or real, suggesting Castro was planning attacks anyway, might have prioritized geopolitical strategy over ethics, might have been more hawkish, more paranoid, more desperate for a military victory. We were one decision away from this becoming reality. One man's conscience, one president's moral clarity. That's all that stood between proposal and execution. Truth 4. We almost never knew. If not for the JFK Assassination Records Review Board, if not for James Bamford's persistence, if not for the specific bureaucratic processes that led to declassification, this document might still be classified today. It could have remained secret for 75 years, 100 years, forever. How many other operations like this exist in files we haven't seen? How many were proposed in the decades since? How many were actually approved? How many were executed? The scariest part of Operation Northwoods isn't what it tells us about 1962. It's what it suggests about every year since, about now. And that leads to the most disturbing question of all, the question that keeps historians and researchers up at night. Question 1. Were there other plans? Operation Northwoods wasn't created in a vacuum. Military planning doesn't work that way. When the Pentagon develops strategies, they don't create one option. They create multiple options. Contingency A, B, C, different scenarios, different approaches, different levels of aggression. If Northwoods made it to Kennedy's desk, how many others never got that far? How many were proposed, refined, debated, and rejected at lower levels? How many were deemed too extreme, even by the standards of people who thought Northwoods was acceptable? Where are those documents? Are they still classified? Were they destroyed? Or are they sitting in boxes, waiting for some future researcher to stumble upon them? Question 2. Did any version ever get approved? This is the question nobody wants to ask, but everyone thinks about. In the years after Kennedy's assassination, did any elements of Northwoods get recycled? Did later administrations face similar proposals? Did any say yes? We know about Operation Northwoods because it was declassified. We know about MKUltra because whistleblowers and investigations exposed it. We know about COINTELPRO because activists broke into an FBI office and stole the files. But what about the operations that stayed secret? The ones that were approved and executed? The ones that worked? How would we ever know? Question 3. What about the Gulf of Tonkin? 2 years after Northwoods, the Gulf of Tonkin incident launched America into the Vietnam War. The official story: North Vietnamese patrol boats attacked the USS Maddox in international waters. Congress passed the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution, giving President Johnson broad war powers. American troops deployed en masse. The reality, admitted decades later by Defense Secretary Robert McNamara and confirmed by declassified NSA documents: the second attack never happened. It was misinterpreted radar signals, overeager sonar operators, bad weather, nervous commanders, and maybe, possibly, something more deliberate. Sound familiar? A fake or exaggerated naval incident to justify war, a manufactured provocation. Exactly what Northwoods proposed for Cuba, executed for Vietnam. Did the generals who wrote Northwoods learn a lesson? Did they learn that you don't propose false flags in official documents, that you don't put it in writing, that you just execute them and claim they were real, that you don't ask the president for permission? We'll probably never know, but the parallels are hard to ignore. Question 4. How easy would this be today? In 1962, Operation Northwoods required elaborate physical staging. Drone aircraft, fake passengers, planted explosives, coordinated media manipulation. It was complex, involving hundreds of people, significant resources, and substantial risk of exposure. In 2025, in the age of cyber warfare, deepfakes, and digital manipulation, how much easier would Operation Northwoods be to execute? No need for drone aircraft substitutions. Just hack a plane's transponder. Make it look like an attack electronically. Release doctored footage. Create fake social media accounts spreading the narrative. Use AI to generate realistic fake videos of the attack. By the time independent investigators could verify anything, by the time fact-checkers could debunk the story, the war would already be underway. Public opinion would be solidified. The troops would be deployed. Technology has made false flag operations easier, more deniable, and harder to disprove. That should terrify anyone who knows about Northwoods. But there's one more document, one more page in the Northwoods file that rarely gets discussed but might be the most revealing of all. Most analyses of Operation Northwoods focus on the 8 main proposals: the attacks, the deceptions, the provocations. But buried in the appendices is something equally revealing: the legal justification. Pentagon lawyers had prepared detailed arguments for why these actions would be legal under U.S. and international law, how they would be classified to avoid Freedom of Information Act requests, what laws would need to be reinterpreted, what executive orders would provide cover, what military regulations would allow such operations. They had anticipated every objection and prepared counters. Every potential legal challenge had been war-gamed and solved. They had found loopholes, exploited ambiguities, and created novel legal theories to justify the unjustifiable. This wasn't a proposal that would shock military lawyers. This was a proposal that military lawyers helped construct, refine, and make legally defensible. Think about what that means. The infrastructure existed, legal, operational, moral, to attack American citizens and blame it on an enemy. The frameworks were in place. The arguments were prepared. The organizational capability was real. The only thing missing was presidential approval. Operation Northwoods fundamentally changed how informed citizens view their government. It shattered assumptions that many considered unquestionable. Before 1997, if you suggested the U.S. military had planned false flag attacks on Americans, you'd be dismissed as a paranoid conspiracy theorist. You'd be lumped in with people who thought the moon landing was fake or that the Earth was flat. You'd be ridiculed, ignored, marginalized. After 1997, we had proof, documentary proof, official proof. It wasn't just possible, it had been proposed, at the highest levels, with institutional support, with legal justification, with operational planning. The document shattered a certain innocence about American government. It proved that at the highest levels, the unthinkable had been thought. The unspeakable had been spoken. The line between protection and betrayal had been crossed, at least on paper, at least in planning. Historians now view Northwoods as a crucial data point. Not evidence of what happened, but evidence of what was possible. What was considered acceptable within certain circles of power. What might have happened under different leadership, different circumstances, different pressures. It changed how we read history. When we learn about incidents that led to war, we now ask, was this real or was this manufactured? When governments present evidence of provocations, we ask, who verified this independently? When intelligence agencies make claims, we ask, what's their motivation? Operation Northwoods taught us that healthy skepticism isn't paranoia. It's wisdom. It's the lesson our government accidentally taught us by letting this document see daylight. Today, the Operation Northwoods documents sit in the National Archives in College Park, Maryland. They're publicly available, fully declassified. Anyone can request them. Anyone can read them. 15 pages that prove beyond any doubt. In 1962, America's top generals proposed attacking their own country. They proposed killing Americans, staging terror attacks, sinking Navy ships, manufacturing evidence, manipulating media, deceiving the public, all to start a war with Cuba, all to achieve strategic objectives, all justified in their minds by the greater good of defeating communism. And the only reason it didn't happen was because one man said no. President Kennedy rejected Operation Northwoods. 8 months later, the Cuban Missile Crisis brought the world to the brink of nuclear war, and Kennedy again chose restraint over escalation. He negotiated. He sought peaceful resolution. He refused to let the hawks push him into war. 13 months after rejecting Northwoods, Kennedy was dead, assassinated in Dallas on November 22, 1963. And while there's no proven connection to Northwoods, while no evidence links his assassination to his rejection of false flag operations, it's impossible not to notice the timeline. The president who refused to start a fake war against Cuba didn't live to finish his term. The generals who proposed the operation continued their careers. Some retired with honor. Some took positions in defense contractors. Some became consultants to future administrations. The system that produced Operation Northwoods continued. The mindset that made it possible continued. The institutions that supported it continued. And that's what should keep us awake at night. The files are public now. The truth is documented. Operation Northwoods was real. It happened or almost happened. The proposal existed. The planning was done. The capability was proven. The question we're left with isn't, could this happen? We know it could. It almost did. The question is it still happening? How many classified operations exist right now with code names we don't know? How many proposals sit on desks in the Pentagon, stamped Top Secret Special Handling, NOFORN, waiting for a president who won't say no? How many times has a version of Operation Northwoods been proposed since 1962? How many times was it approved? How many times was it executed? We learned about Operation Northwoods 35 years after it was written. 35 years of secrecy. 35 years of the truth being hidden from the American people. What are we going to learn about the 1980s when those files are declassified in the 2020s? What will we learn about the 2000s in the 2040s? What will we learn about 2025 and 2060? What operations are happening right now that our grandchildren will read about in horror, the way we read about Northwoods? What will they think of us for not knowing, for not stopping it, for not asking the right questions? The files are marked declassified. The stamps say the information is no longer secret. But the mindset that created Operation Northwoods, the institutional culture that made it possible, the willingness to sacrifice citizens for strategic goals. That might still be classified, or worse, it might still be operational.